That's not all you're saying. That is not all you're saying.
You think that? No,
you
pretty much what I'm saying.
That's all you're saying.
That's what strength of record is.
You think that's what you're saying. That's actually not what you're saying, though. I mean, we'll leave it there.
Hello and welcome to The Audible presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Ralph Russo from The Athletic, joined as always, or as most always, by my colleagues Stuart Mandel and Bruce Feldman. Don't forget, every episode of this show you can find on YouTube. Find us at Audible Show. Later, we'll make some picks for this week's biggest games. We'll also target a couple of upset picks and give some flowers to Bruce, who finally came off the canvas and had a pretty nice week in terms of his picks. But first, it is ranking season. The college football playoff second rankings come out, well, later today, depending on when you're listening. We are recording on Monday. We are not necessarily going to preview those rankings. Not much happened this week to affect the college football rankings, but we are going to dive into some scenarios and where we think things might be heading in the college football playoff picture. Boys, where to start on the playoffs, because it's all about the playoffs down the stretch here. Let's maybe go with Texas Tech, because that's the place where I'm most interested to see like where this team is heading and where things are going. I'm kind of wondering if Texas Tech ends up as a top 4 team by the time the season is over. And I think we'll get a glimpse of that coming off of their big win, Stu, against BYU this weekend.
It's that time of the year where we start to look at teams' resumes and be like, that's not as impressive as I necessarily thought it was. So when you reference Texas Tech, one team that I'm wondering shouldn't they be higher than is Ole Miss, because we talked about Texas Tech a lot on Sunday. They now have 2 wins over teams currently in the top 15, and they were both blowouts. Their one loss was against a decent team, the defending Big 12 champions, on the road. Last minute rally by ASU. Texas Tech didn't have its quarterback, so I think that's a pretty good resume. I'm sorry, ASU didn't have its quarterback. Pretty good resume. You look at Ole Miss, who's basically almost already in the playoff at this point. Their big win, obviously, was at Oklahoma. All credit for that. But then what? LSU seemed like a big deal at the time. Tulane, I don't think is, I think that's a good team. I don't think it's on the level of the teams that Texas Tech has beaten. So I think there's been an assumption, Bruce, that those top 4 teams, to Ralph's point, it's just been assumed. Well, the top 4 seeds, now that it's not conference champions necessarily, will all be Big Ten and SEC teams. And I'm saying, maybe Texas Tech should be bumping up ahead of some of these SEC teams.
Yeah, I think Texas Tech, for me, they have, like you said, they've been dominant. I think I said this on the last show. There's been 5 games, including the one against a previously undefeated BYU team, where they didn't even give up a point till the fourth quarter. I mean, they just blew them off the field. And you look at how they dominated BYU last week. As you said, the game they lost, they did not have their starting quarterback, Baron Morton. Now, it's a little bit of like, I don't want to say it's a red herring, but like, because Will Hammond, the backup, had played so well the first time we really saw him when they were at Utah, and he actually felt like he even played even better than Morton did in that game. But then his play kind of tailed off before he got hurt. So I do think there's something to that. I don't remember if it was about a month or so ago. I remember asking you guys, and I think Ralph and I talked about this, was who do you think is better? Is Texas Tech or Texas A&M the best team in the state of Texas, right? Here we are right now where you could make a very compelling argument, I think, for the Red Raiders if they come out of this 12-1, run the table, then beat whoever they have to beat in the Big 12 title game and say, yeah, they're going to earn a top 4 spot. I mean, I think it's legitimate. I'm looking at Ole Miss, as you said. I mean, in fairness to them, the loss they had was a relatively close one. I don't know where Tulane's going to end up. I watched that game. They dominated Tulane. That was probably the worst Tulane's looked, including the UTSA game. But here we are with the potential of Texas Tech. Ralph, knowing how the landscape kind of sets up, I didn't mean to do 6-7 there, by the way. Is it going to be? Yeah, I'm kids that age, so I guess I should be allowed to. I mean, is it crazy to think, or we've talked about how much Cody Campbell, that the big Texas Tech boosters spent, the money that they put on the roster, but like this is kind of gone for the most part as advertised. I don't know. There's no elite teams in college football. They look to be, maybe with the possible exception, I would say, of Ohio State, of as good as anybody and as talented as anybody.
At least on one side of the ball, right? At least on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not entirely sure if they have an elite offense, but I would like to see you score in the red zone more than one every 1 to 5 trips into the red zone. I'd like to see you score a touchdown in your big games. I am definitely on board with the idea that Texas Tech is in the mix and is similar to some of these SEC schools. I guess what I tend to wonder is, how are we measuring that? And it kind of goes back to the conversation that we had last week with Ari, where we kind of got bogged down. Not really bogged down. I thought it was a good debate about Miami and Notre Dame. And again, like we're doing sort of what matters to me, data, vibes, and things along those lines. And I guess where I get a little set off is when we start narrowing down the resumes to deal with because you were like, well, the Tulane game and the Oklahoma game. It's like, this team has played 9 games. Let's just review the 9 games and see how they stand. And by the way, there's a way to do that. There's a whole bunch of power rankings and things like that, which is what the committee is trying to assimilate a little bit more of. So I get a little, I don't like to get too granular here when it comes to what is their best win. Let me just see how they've played. Let me just see how they've played all year. And I'm not going to worry if Oklahoma is as good a win or BYU is. So yeah, I'm down with Texas Tech. I'm down with Texas Tech being, as good as some of these SEC teams. What I get a little bothered by is how we're going about this argument of assessing resumes, because I find it to be a little circular logic, and you end up going down rabbit holes that are not necessarily productive, Stu, to actually get the answer that you're looking for.
I'm actually going to cede my 2 minutes to Bruce because I know how he feels about, it's
a good point.
Not going granular on the resume and looking at the power rankings. So you go, Bruce, then I'll go.
Okay. So on the granular part, if you're going to cede it to the power rankings, and look, this is one that gets brought up on the ranking show when it comes out, ESPN's FPI. And I'm just going to go through it a little bit, things that jumped out at me. Right now, ESPN's FPI, their power rankings, have Notre Dame number 5. They're ahead, not just of Miami, who beat them. They're actually ahead of Texas A&M, who's at number 7, who, by the way, went to South Bend and beat Notre Dame and is undefeated. They're also 8 spots ahead of Miami, same record, also beat Notre Dame. You have, in those same power rankings, USC is number 10, ahead of the Texas Tech team we had just been talking about. The Trojans lost to Illinois. They did whip Michigan. That's okay. They lost by double digits to Notre Dame. And they beat Nebraska without Dylan Raiola. If we're going to go, who got hurt in that game, if we're going to go granular, may as well point it out. But in those same power rankings, same ones, 3-6 Penn State, which is 0-6 against Power 4 opponents. 0-6.
Yeah,
their best win.
This is working against you, by the way. This particular argument going to Penn State is actually working against
their
you.
Best win. Penn State, who is number 21 in the power rankings, number 21 in ESPN's power rankings. Their best win is over an FCS team, a good one, but it's still Villanova. That is the best win. They're 3-6. They're in the top 25, and I'm supposed to take the power rankings and say that matters. I mean, LSU is 22, and they're 5-4. And Ralph, Auburn is also in the top 25, and they're 4-6.
I'm starting to understand why I'm doing so much better in the picks against the spread than Bruce.
The picks are not, Stu, the picks are not what's supposed to be in the rankings. These are 2 different things.
You can't, so in the basketball committee, it's almost all numbers. It's used to be RPI.
It is
now
a
it's net
different
rankings.
Sport. It is a different
That's the point
sport.
I'm about to make. It's too small a sample size. You can't just go based off computer rankings. What you can use computer rankings for, though, is a piece of the discussion, right? And they talk about that all the time. There's not one thing that matters more. We look at the numbers, we look at the eye test, we look at the resumes, right? And I do think that for most college football fans, what they care about most is who did you beat and who did you lose to, right? And that's why I said, hey, going by that, I do think Texas Tech has a better resume than Ole Miss. I think they have a better, I wouldn't put them above like Alabama, Georgia. What's interesting is when you start looking at resumes, Texas A&M's undefeated. They beat Notre Dame. They should be in the top 3. I don't think we can argue that. But it is a little disturbing to me. So Seth Emerson broke down the SEC tiebreakers, of which there's like 800 for the conference championship. And one of them is at a certain point, they do SEC opponents' records, conference records. Texas A&M has the teams that they not just have already played, but will play, which includes Texas, currently have a combined conference record of 13-34. 13-34. Does that mean you should drop them down the committee rankings? No, but it kind of speaks to what we're talking about. Like, hey, take a deeper look at the resumes. Don't just be like, well, they had this one really good win and they had this. Who have these teams actually played at this point in the season?
Okay, that's that. But if they had gone to San Antonio, beat UTSA, or if they went to East Lansing and beat Michigan State, as opposed to going to Notre Dame and beating them, look, they'd still, because they're an SEC team that's undefeated in basically mid-November, they would still be probably a top 6 team. But the fact that they went to Notre Dame, like that's a really good win. I think you have to, and the problem I have with the power rankings is it's just too easy to say, to look at specific examples. It goes, if this is what the formula is telling you, the formula is very flawed. That's what I would argue.
We're going to take a quick break and we will be back for more of this discussion.
So there are a couple of different ways to do these power rankings. And again, what the committee is trying to do is use something that's a record strength metric, right? Which is a little more like if you go to, let's say, I hate to just pop ESPN all the time, but if you go to FPI and click on the resume page, it looks a little different from what the regular power ranking does. SP Plus has the same thing. There's a resume SP Plus. I'll give other guys a pop here. There's a guy, Kelly Ford on Twitter does K-Ford ratings, and he's got most deserving and a straight up power ranking. And the most deserving tends to look a little different because it weights, hey, have you won your games a little more as opposed to how well you have played. And my only point of all of this is like, I think when you start diving into the resumes here and you bring up something like, well, look at Notre Dame and what they were doing in the fourth quarter against BC. It's like, whoa, who cares? Who cares? That's not relevant. And Vandy, like, what does their resume look like? And you're right. Like, you kind of look and you go, oh, the Vandy, that's, maybe they don't have as many quote unquote big wins, but Bruce, like, Auburn is not Auburn's 1-6 in the SEC is not the same as a 1-6 team in the ACC. And Penn State is 0-6, but you understand, like, Penn State's a lot different than Wisconsin in the
There's
Big
a great
Ten.
Exactly. That's what I just looked up, right? So we just talked about that on the show
like Penn
Sunday
State's
in terms of like
give
Indiana a little bit of credit.
They're a decent team, but they're also not a team that has any business in a top 25 ranking.
Yeah, but my general point with some of these computer rankings in general is like, I think it's a good way to sort of start the argument. And if you want to say, listen, Notre Dame is 5, Miami's 13. Yeah, that's like close enough to me because I actually have that rated the same in or ranked that way in my top 25 for the AP, right? I have Miami ahead.
I'm sorry, say that again, because I know, like, this was one thing that was interesting, when we talked with Ari the other day, where I felt like you were arguing with Ari and me to a lesser degree. And then when we got done, you were like, but I had it the same way you guys are saying it in my poll.
So I agree with you that as of right this moment, if I look, when I sit down and I sort of go through the computer rankings, which I like to do is to give myself a little bit of a guide before I rank the teams, I want to see how close these teams are. I'm not beholden to the computer rankings, but if these teams are within a certain range of each other, kind of like the committee does, then at a certain point, the head-to-head becomes a tiebreaker. The committee has determined that Miami and Notre Dame are not close enough for the head-to-head to be used as a tiebreaker. I disagree. I think I'd rather just sort of use the computers to be my guide and then start using my own, like, okay, big wins and things along those lines. I just worry that too much of the discussion like just goes down a rabbit hole. So then we go from like, well, who has Oklahoma beat and who has Vanderbilt beat? And then all of a sudden you find yourself going, wait, well, who were we talking about before?
But I don't think you mean I'd rather use the computer to be my guide. I get you can say it to be a factor in it, but you would like, for me, it's always if the teams actually played, because I come back to this more than any point, which is, and Stu brought this up a bit ago about college basketball, where there's a way bigger sample size to choose from. It's rare. It's not the NFL, because now we have 130 teams as opposed to, a quarter of that, less than a quarter of that. So you end up with, if they actually played, that has to have a lot of significance. That's just the part where I feel like it's something. And
that's one of the criteria, right, on the protocol is head to head. But, I think, and we don't need to belabor this too much, but the thing that the computer rankings are most useful for is not honestly like this team is ranked 16th, therefore they should be. It's assessing their competition. And you guys brought up a great example before. Wisconsin and Penn State have the same exact record, 3-6. Wisconsin even has a top 25 win now, having beaten Washington. Penn State in the SP Plus is ranked 20th, and Wisconsin is ranked 90th. So that's important, because otherwise, if you just look at a team's schedule, be like, well, they beat a 3-6 team. This team beat a 3-6 team. And that means the same thing. No. Context is important. How a team plays is important. I would actually love for the football committee to do the quad 1, quad 2, quad 3 thing like basketball does. I've heard the argument against it is there's just not enough games.
Yeah.
I get it.
No, connectivity.
But like, instead of just the only things the committee ever cites are top 25 record, and which has always led to the question of, but how do they know that it was a top 25 win before they finish actually ranking the teams, and like 500 or better, right? And so if Penn State ends up going, let's say 5-7, that will not count toward Indiana's 500 or better. But we have enough data to say like that was actually a pretty impressive win going on the road and beating a team that's in the top 25 of the power rankings. So when you hear them, the ESPN people and then the committee cite strength of record, if that's actually what they're doing, I actually think that's a very useful and relevant category, because it's exactly because these computer rankings are opponent adjusted, strength of schedule adjusted. So if you're telling me that Oregon's, are they 8-1 now? That Oregon's 8-1 was actually easier to accomplish than Oklahoma's 7-2, I think, and I don't know if that's true or not. I think that's an important thing to use.
All I would say is
take a break.
No, I'm going to force you. No, I want the last word here. All I would say is this. I think the way you do it, Bruce, is you tend to throw information out, and I don't want that. I want to keep all the information in, because I do think that you tend to focus on a couple of big games. Who's your best win? What's your loss? What's your best win? And I want the whole thing to count. I want the whole 8-9 games at this point to count. Tell me how you've played over the whole 9 games, and let's not worry about argue over whether Oklahoma is better than USC, right? Because ultimately that will determine if Texas is better than Notre Dame. Because I think that's not
how I factor it. Because I was I would say who's your best win, then who else comes after it. Now, I wouldn't go.
But even that is not. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this like Oklahoma is your best win. Okay, USC is your best win.
What's your next best win?
No, let's just. No, let's.
I mean, the reality is the way Bruce is describing it.
My biggest frustration with this thing is when you go back to something where none of us, if you said give us the top 30 teams, would have Penn State anywhere near there. You have to base it what's gone on the field. They lost to a winless UCLA team that hadn't led anybody. Then they turned around and lost at home to a pretty mediocre Northwestern team. I get it. They have this isn't how Mel Kiper or Dane Brugler ranks the rosters.
No, but we're not doing that either. They're clearly a much better team than what their record is.
They are. The record's terrible, but they're also not a 6-3 team.
Bruce, nobody is suggesting Penn State should be ranked in the committee rankings. Nobody is suggesting that. All we're saying is we have 9 games worth of data that says Indiana going and winning on the road at Penn State is more impressive than somebody going on the road and beating Wisconsin. That's really all that.
That's not all you're saying. That is not all you're saying.
You think that? No,
that's pretty much what I'm saying.
That's all you're saying.
That's what strength of record is.
You think that's what you're saying. That's actually not what you're saying, though. I mean, we'll leave it there.
All right, we should take a break.
20 minutes, and I feel like I'm dumber than when I started. I didn't.
Which is saying something still.
I didn't learn. I feel like and hopefully the listeners don't feel more confused than they did before we started. But at the end of the day, Ralph is huge on analytics. Bruce hates analytics. I think you need to do somewhere in the middle. I
don't hate analytics.
Time for a quick break. We're going to come back, and I'm going to use a whole bunch of analytics to make some picks of games this weekend.
All right, we're back. We're ready to pick some games against the spread. But of course, I want to just remind people or bring them up to speed on what our records are so far this season. Ralph, you and I went 2-2. I got my upset, which was Hawaii. I didn't think they were going to crush San Diego State like that. Bruce had a heck of a weekend, 3-1 against the spread, and you hit an upset special that I don't know that anybody would have thought of, right? Missouri State was your upset pick. That brings us to, Bruce, you've improved your record to 14-21. Ralph is up to 20-15, and I am at 23-13.
Tough to run down.
You guys must have had some pushes along the way. Yeah. So, gosh, I mean, usually I would fade my picks, but this season, I guess you should be actually putting money on my picks. All right, 4 big games just said this week.
And then you're going to jinx yourself.
Yeah. Well, I'm due to go 0-4 at some point. All right, let's start with the game that Game Day is going to. Notre Dame at Pitt. Pitt has cracked the top 25. By the way, Pat Narduzzi said he basically doesn't care if they win this game because it's not a conference game. He said if they lose 100-10, he'd be fine with that as long as they win their ACC game. So take that for what it's worth. Notre Dame is 10.5. What do you got, Ralph?
Well, mostly what I got is a kid who failed to download her ticket for this game quickly enough. So now I got to go buy her a ticket after I already bought her season tickets. So I wanted to pick Pitt to pull the upset, but Notre Dame has sort of been a wagon here, and they tend to beat the heck out of these teams that they should beat these days. It's no longer the Brian Kelly Notre Dame. So I'm going to go with, I'll go with Notre Dame and lay the points. It's a big number, but I'll lay the points.
I was going to take Notre Dame to win the game, but not cover. But somewhere in the last 20 minutes when Ralph started talking, I was just like, maybe rethink this. So I'm going to agree with Ralph and say Notre Dame wins, especially with Pat Narduzzi going, I don't care if we win or lose this particular game. So give me the Irish and Marcus Freeman.
I'm very bullish on Notre Dame. I'm still going to pick Pitt to cover. That's a big number. Notre Dame kind of mucked it up at BC a couple weeks ago. I don't know. Maybe I'll regret putting my faith in the Panthers, but Panthers cover 10.5. Notre Dame wins the football game. Now we go to a big one in the SEC. There's 2 top 10 games in the SEC this week, but we've got Texas going to Georgia because they play each other like every 5 or 6 games now. Georgia is a 6-point favorite in Athens. This time I'll start with Bruce. What do you got?
I got Georgia. Georgia's gotten after Texas the last couple of times, especially in the trenches. Now they're not as good up front. Lord knows they don't have anywhere near the pass rush that they had previously. A bunch of those guys are obviously now in the NFL. Texas has looked better, but Georgia looked really good last week. I mean, they didn't have to come back in the second half. They jumped all over Mississippi State in cowbell land. I am going with the Dogs. Ralph, do you agree with me?
I think I'm going to take Texas here. I am very close, though. Very, very, very close. Like, I mean, one more Georgia performance from fully boarding the Georgia bandwagon. Like, I feel like Kirby's team's toughness, resilience, like, I love all that. And I know they got players. I know there are athletes there, even though they're maybe not playing up to Georgia level standards. I'm going to give Texas the nod because that's a lot of points. So I'll take those points in what should be a close game. But I also find myself like watching this game going, okay, Georgia, what you got? Because I do wonder if Georgia is ready to sort of be the best team in the SEC, even though others have better records.
Yeah, I think Georgia, for the longest time, we were really fixated on the defense is not up to Kirby Smart standards, while missing the fact that the offense has gotten really good. And in particular, Gunnar Stockton has gotten really good over those last 3 games, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception, 84% completions against Ole Miss. He's really good, and they've got a running game to go with him, so give me the Dogs.
Stu, before you move on, just a quick question, you guys. I feel like we are into mid-November, and I feel like for 2 teams that are blue blood teams and came in with high expectations, I feel like we don't know really that much about them yet. I mean, I feel like we know a little more about Georgia. I don't feel like we know that much about Texas at this point, just because they started out so rough on offense, and then, they've gotten it together, but I just don't feel like we know that much about them like we do the other teams.
Know why I'm laughing? Because I'm going to tell you, we've got 8 games. We've got 8 games worth of data here, and I could look at like numbers and yeah, I know a lot about Texas.
Don't even go there. Don't even go there.
I'm not going to.
I mean, I think what makes Texas unique is the trajectory of the season, where they started out rough. They beat Oklahoma. That calmed people for a little bit. They lose to Florida. No, they have these close calls against these bad SEC teams. And yet here they are. They're back in the top 10. This is a team that went from preseason number 1 to unranked, right, Ralph?
Yeah.
To back in the top 10 in the course of one season. So I think what you're alluding to, Bruce, is like, it's not so much we don't know them. It's like, which version are you getting on a week-to-week basis?
I think it's more of a Texas certainly than them.
Yeah. I think we've overreacted to Texas in many ways. I think we've had great, like, huge manic swings on Texas on like, they're great, they're this, they're that. And like, when in reality, they've been good. Like, they've been good. They just maybe haven't been as good as we thought they would be.
Some of it also, I feel like, is the overreaction of the arch factor of this, of we're writing them off, we're doing this. I think that's probably fed into it.
Yeah, those go hand in hand for sure. Okay, the other top 10 game in the SEC, Oklahoma at Alabama. Alabama's a 6.5 point favorite. I wouldn't be surprised if we all go the same way on this. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, this one I think I'm going to go with Alabama and give the big point spread. Not totally. Oklahoma's defense is really good, guys, but like I just Alabama at home after what happened last year in that game, you'd think that Oklahoma has their attention. So yeah, I'll lay the points and take Alabama here, even though, as you alluded to before, maybe there's a little bit of Alabama overratedness that we're overlooking after how they played against LSU.
For me, I'm sitting there looking at it going, I wrote the word down, revenge, ? And I'm like, man, this Kalen board seems like of all the head coaches in college football would be the least likely to be a revenge guy. But it was such a bad performance last year, and it really cost them the playoff. I get it. They didn't look great last week against pretty suspect LSU operation, but I will take them in the big number and ride the tide. So that's 2 of us. Stu, you with us?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's overrated, more overrated than Alabama might be. I don't think Alabama's overrated, although SP Plus tells us they are. But you're right, Bruce. Like, what happened to them in Norman last year, like, they're going to be out for blood. So Tide covers the 6.5. Is that the first game in a while where we all picked the same team? I feel like we tend to avoid that.
I don't think rarely do we all get on board here. Yeah, do we have the 3 helmets across? We don't really get that often.
We also have had very similar point spreads. Texas, Georgia was 6, Alabama was 6.5, and now we get Iowa at USC, 6.5. Playoff elimination game for the Trojans. Iowa kind of eliminated themselves last week. Bruce.
I'm going with the home team USC. A little bit of momentum. Iowa, tough loss last week. The other thing is Iowa's worst game last year was out in Los Angeles. They came out here. They got off to a fast start, and then UCLA beat them. I think USC is going to beat them. I mean, the spread's a little bigger than I would have liked it, but I think USC is better than that. I just think this is a tough road trip for the Hawkeyes. Ralph, you with me?
Yeah, I'm going to go ride in the same side as you here, Bruce. I'm the same way. Like, am I slowly warming up to trusting USC under Lincoln Riley? Maybe there's a little bit more trust there. I also do wonder, like, Iowa, physical, tough, disappointing loss. Now you go on the road, time zones, not blah, 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 against a very good offensive team. It just seems like a tough spot. Even though I don't love giving up a touchdown here, it just seems like a tough spot for a limited offensive team in Iowa to pull this off. Even though, again, like I said, the number looks a little big for my liking, but I'll go with USC to cover it.
You're going to get some angry tweets now from Hawkeye fans. They are not offensively challenged anymore, right?
Sure they are.
That 92-yard drive against Oregon, come on. No, I'm not going to get worked up about that. As you guys know, I saw USC up close last week, and by up close I mean whenever they were from like the 25-yard line to the end zone in the right-hand corner near the torch. They're good. I think they're pretty good. I think they're very Jekyll and Hyde, though, between how they play at home and how they play on the road. At home, give me USC to cover against the Hawkeyes. And so now we do our upsets. And I will start with yours, Ralph.
I know you were going to come to me because I kind of almost forgot who I was going to pick. So if I'm wrong here, if I say the wrong team, please remind me. I'm going to go in the Big 12. And I'm going to go with Arizona on the road against Cincinnati. This is a little counterintuitive for me because I have been the Bearcat guy. Like in the preseason, I thought, that could be the team that rises up and contends in the Big 12. And then Scott Satterfield's team, sort of backed me up and made me look smart. So that's a good thing. Like, always root for the teams that make you look smart. I don't know. Brent Brennan and Arizona got a nice win last week against Kansas. I still think there's some Big 12ing left to do within the Big 12. So I'll take Arizona to pull off a road upset against the Bearcats, even though, again, feels a little counterintuitive, that pick.
I'm going to go into the SEC for my upset pick, Stu, and I'm going to take... It's been a rough year for the Razorbacks. Bobby Petrino, since he's been the interim, has still had some games where they put up a bunch of points. They're a 5.5-point underdog against LSU. LSU's got a little bit of a quarterback quandary situation they're dealing with, and I don't think it's going to be fun for them to go try to slow down Bobby Petrino's offense. Give me the Razorbacks in a upset.
They also play for that big boot, right? They play for that enormous trophy. That's like the heaviest trophy, I believe, in college football. And it's the boot that is Arkansas and the shape of Louisiana together.
The golden boot. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, it's a golden boot, but it's enormous. It takes like four people to carry it.
Quick, favorite junkie rivalry name.
Floyd of Rosedale. I love that they play for a pig.
Keg of Nails.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Oh, that's
you
really
meant
good.
the name, not the trophy itself?
Yeah.
I mean, Floyd of Rosedale's still a pretty good name. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Best name. I don't know. Best name. Well, cocktail party. The cocktail party is the best name. The best trophy is definitely the pig. Yeah. Or one of the Paul Bunyan's axes. Isn't there like a Paul Bunyan trophy and a Paul Bunyan's axe? The Big Ten's got all the trophies down, right? Because I think Michigan State and Michigan play for the Paul Bunyan trophy.
Bucket, yeah.
The Open Bucket's pretty good too.
This week on CBS, you can see one of the more sacred ones in the Big Ten, actually. It's 3-6 Penn State at 3-6 Michigan State in the Land Grant Trophy. You know about the Land Grant Trophy, right?
The Land Grant Trophy looks like the Chotsky shelf in your grandparents' house. Oh, what is this, Papa?
What's the one that Faux Pellini instituted about the fake?
That is the civil
broken
conflict thing, or
Oh, no, not the civil. There's a Nebraska one.
UConn
it's
one.
not an official one that somebody on Twitter, and I think it might have been Faux Pellini, made up. That's called like the battle for the broken chair.
Was it maybe? I don't know. Was it Nebraska, Iowa before they actually had a trophy? It could have been that. Like maybe when Nebraska, Minnesota. Maybe again.
It was Nebraska. That's it. It was
Nebraska, Minnesota has the broken chair.
That's not an official one though. Okay, where are we now?
It's up to you for your upset pick to close the show. Still,
how did we get into the obscure? The golden. Okay. Also, I'm doing one in the SEC as well, and that is, I was really alarmed by Missouri's performance last week with the third string quarterback. They are a touchdown favorite. I don't like picking road underdogs usually, but Mississippi State 7-point underdog in Columbia. Give me the Bulldogs, who have been just right there on the cusp all season. Right, so many near misses.
Except last week.
Did get one in there, except last week. I do acknowledge that their quarterback Blake Shapen got hurt last week, but and didn't practice actually on Monday, but. They had Jeff Lebby had said after the game he was cleared. He could have come back in. I'm going to take a gamble and think that they were just being cautious. Okay, that brings us to the end of the episode. Just remember, as always, that every episode of The Audible is available on YouTube at Audible Show, including our Sunday reaction shows that air at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. In the meantime, we will be answering your mailbag questions in Thursday's episode, so send them to theaudiblepod@gmail.com. Ralph, repeat that real quick.
Theaudiblepod@gmail.com.
Yeah, you're learning. All right. See you next time.